Hello, dreamers. Welcome back to Legend Before Sleep. I'm your host, Sean, and tonight I shall be your guide into a truly magical world where moonlight meets ancient markets and fate hides ever so slyly inside a dusty lamp. So, close your eyes now. Let the rain wash away all your thoughts and drift with me into the timeless tale of Aladdin. In a faraway city, wrapped in warm winds and starlit evenings, nestled between the silver sands of the desert and the whispering riverbanks, there lived a boy named Aladdin. He was not noble, no, he was not wealthy either, but he had a heart like the sky, wide, curious, and always dreaming. Aladdin lived with his mother in a small clay house tucked between winding alleys. They had little to their name, but each night his mother would light a little lantern by the window, and together they would listen to the rain tap against the old roof, while she told him stories of faraway lands and golden destinies. Aladdin listened, eyes wide, believing that maybe, just maybe, one day a story might find him. One rainy afternoon, while the market stalls dripped with spice-scented rain, a tall man in dark robes appeared, his voice like velvet, and his eyes glowing strangely beneath his hood. He called himself Azar, a traveler from distant lands. But in truth, he was a sorcerer. Not cruel, exactly, just hungry for power and secrets lost in time. Azar claimed to be Aladdin's long-lost uncle. He told the boy of treasures buried beneath the desert, of magic waiting to be found. Aladdin, curious and wide-eyed, agreed to follow him. So they set out, past the edge of the city, through olive groves and quiet dunes, until they reached a lonely hill where no birds sang, and the earth seemed to breathe beneath their feet. There, in the hush of twilight, Azar whispered ancient words. The earth shivered. The sand split, and from the deep earth rose a stone doorway, inscribed with glowing symbols that flickered like fireflies in the rain. Azar turned to Aladdin. "Only you can enter," he said. "Bring me the old brass lamp you'll find deep inside. Touch nothing else." And with that, the boy stepped into the earth. The air grew cooler. The cave smelled of jasmine and dust. Lanterns flickered to life without flame, revealing a world of wonder. Golden fountains poured moonlight. Jewels glittered like sleeping stars. And trees grew crystal fruit, humming with magic. But Aladdin, true to his promise, reached only for the dusty old lamp. Just as he turned to leave, the cave began to rumble. At the entrance, Azar's voice was sharp now. "Hand me the lamp," but something in the boy's heart warned him. This man was not family. This man wanted the lamp for himself. So Aladdin refused. In a flash of fury, Azar struck the stone with his staff. The entrance sealed shut, trapping Aladdin in the darkness. Silence fell. Rain echoed faintly through the rock above, but Aladdin did not panic. He sat quietly, cradling the lamp in his hands, and in a moment of weary curiosity, he rubbed it. There was no thunder, no explosion, just a warm breeze. And a voice, deep and kind, like 1,000 rainstorms whispered together, left double quotation mark, but gentle and shimmering, his robes woven from stardust, his eyes full of ancient dreams. "I am the genie," he said, "and you are my master." Aladdin blinked, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel small. With a simple wish, the cave melted away like a dream. The genie carried Aladdin back to the city, where he built a home finer than any palace, with courtyards full of jasmine, fountains of sweet water, and a room where Aladdin's mother could rest, surrounded by soft pillows and the scent of orange blossoms. The city whispered about the mysterious nobleman who appeared overnight, but Aladdin kept quiet. He still walked the alleys he grew up in, still listened to the rain on clay roofs, still dreamed. One evening, wandering through the palace gardens, Aladdin saw her. She was not dressed in jewels or gold, just a simple robe, blue like twilight. Her name was Layla, the daughter of the Sultan. She sat beneath a fig tree, letting the rain fall on her face, eyes closed, lips curved in the hint of a secret smile. They didn't speak, not that first night. But something passed between them, like the hush between thunder and lightning. Days turned to weeks, and one morning, Aladdin made a wish, not for gold or power, but for a chance to speak to her, to sit beneath that fig tree, to laugh with her in the rain. And slowly, she came to know him, not as a prince, but as a person. They spoke of dreams and stories, of stars they'd never reached, of songs they only remembered in sleep. Love bloomed quietly, like a flower only seen by moonlight. But the past does not stay buried. Azar returned. He had watched from the shadows, learning the lamp had been used and that its power still pulsed. Disguised as a traveling merchant, he tricked Aladdin's mother into trading the lamp for a new one, polished and false. And once Azar held it again, he cast Aladdin's palace into the wind. Overnight, it vanished, carried far into the desert, with Aladdin and Layla still inside. They awoke in silence, the palace half buried in dunes, the air heavy with enchantment. But Layla took his hand. "You still have your heart," she said, "and your courage. The lamp was never your magic." And she was right. For Aladdin had grown, not in riches, but in spirit. With nothing but a single candle, he lit a fire of hope, calling upon the ring the genie had once gifted him as a token of friendship, not bound by wishes, but by kindness. The genie appeared, weary but still faithful. "This is your final wish," laid hand in the ring. Aladdin set for a bustle, then at the desert, and finally, he whispered, "I wish for peace, for us, for Azar too, even if he cannot find it." And so, the genie unmade the sorcerer's hunger. He erased the greed, the bitterness, the scars of time. Azar disappeared, not in anger, but in silence. The palace returned to its home by the river, gently landing beneath the rain. Aladdin and Layla married not in gold, but beneath a sky full of rain clouds, with petals floating on the breeze, and candles flickering in glass jars. They ruled with kindness. They dreamed together. And every night, as the rain whispered on their windows, Aladdin would sit beside his mother, now resting in peace, and tell stories of genies, of magic, of love found beneath a fig tree. The city of Zaran had many palaces. Some were golden, some guarded by marble lions or sapphire gates, but none were as mysterious as the one that appeared overnight. A palace not built by hands, but by a whisper of magic and the gentle will of a boy who once had nothing. Its towers were shaped like lilies. Its lanterns glowed with soft firelight, even in the rain. And in its garden, quiet and wide, a fig tree grew beside a mirror-like pool. Aladdin had everything he could wish for, but still there was a quiet ache in his chest. He missed something, or perhaps someone. It happened one afternoon when the sky was pale grey and rain pattered like a lullaby on the palace roof. Aladdin, wandering the garden paths barefoot, caught a glimpse of someone through the misted trees. A girl, cloaked in indigo, sat alone beneath the fig tree. Raindrops kissed her cheeks. Her eyes were closed, as if listening to some song only she could hear. She didn't speak, didn't rise. She simply smiled, as though she had been waiting for him, not for hours or days, but for lifetimes. His breath caught. His heart, so used to racing for danger or gold, slowed, softened. He didn't approach. He didn't want to break the spell. That night, he asked the genie, "Who is she?" And the genie replied, with a small, knowing smile, "She is Layla, the daughter of the Sultan. But more than that, she is someone who walks gently through the world, even when it rains." Days passed. Each afternoon, Aladdin would return to the garden. Sometimes Layla was there, sometimes not. But when she was, she would hum garden. The sky stretched wide above them, full of stars behind drifting clouds. "Do you ever think this could last?" she asked. Aladdin turned to her, his voice steady as thunder far away. "If it doesn't, then I will be grateful that it happened at all." She rested her head on his shoulder, and somewhere in the trees, a night bird sang. The genie, watching from the lantern light, smiled quietly. For this, he thought, was magic no lamp could ever match. Far beyond the city of Zaran, beyond the edge of the last oasis, in a place where even stars hesitated to shine, a man stirred from shadow, Azar, a sorcerer. He had wandered since the cave, his hands burned from betrayal, his pride hollowed by defeat. He had seen Aladdin's palace, glittering like a jewel in the desert. He had heard whispers of the boy's rise, of the lamp's power in gentler hands. And in the deepest part of him, a hunger began to gnaw. That lamp was mine. That boy was mine to shape. Azar returned in silence, not with fire or storm, but in disguise, as the rain draped the city in silver mist. He slipped among the market stalls, his eyes hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hood. He carried a satchel of old trinkets, brass pots, cracked mirrors, tiny glass animals. To most, he was no more than a passing merchant. But to those who listened, his voice had the curl of a promise. And one day, that voice found its way to the door of Aladdin's palace. Aladdin was away, visiting the river gardens with Layla, and the one who answered the door that day was his mother. She remembered Azar's face, but time had softened the edges of memory. His voice was warm, his smile kind. "I trade old lamps," he said softly, "for ones new and shining. A gift for your son." He showed her a beautiful golden lamp, polished to a mirror sheen, and gently, carefully, she gave him the old, dull lamp in exchange. Just an object, she thought, just a dusty relic from a story long over. But as soon as Azar held it in his hand, his smile shifted, and the sky darkened. That night, as Aladdin and Layla lay beneath the fig tree, the air changed. The rain slowed. The world held its breath. And then, a crack of wind, a flicker of lightning not born from storm, and the palace began to tremble. The walls groaned. The marble steps vanished into smoke, and the garden was swept away. Aladdin shouted Layla's name, groping her hand as the earth beneath them vanished. Together, they fell, not into ruin, but into sand, 1,000 grains, an endless hush. When they awoke, the sky above them was pale blue and vast. The palace had been dropped in the heart of the desert, half buried by dunes and spellwork. The fig tree was gone, the pool dry, but Layla was beside him, her hair tangled with wind, her eyes sharp with calm. "He has the lamp again," she whispered. "Does that mean your magic is gone?" Aladdin looked at his hands, at the ring still on his finger, the one the genie had given him freely, and then at Layla. "The lamp gave me a chance," he said softly, "but everything that matters came after." They stood together, wrapped in sand and silence. Not broken, only tested. Azar, now in command of the lamp, remade the palace in his own image. The domes turned black as obsidian. The fountains spilled ink instead of water. The windows no longer faced the moon, but only themselves. He summoned the genie, but something was different. The genie appeared, yes, bound now to Azar's will, but quieter, duller, dimmed like a candle beneath a glass. "I will obey," he said, voice thin. "But know this, a master who rules from fear rules alone." Azar did not care. He sat on Aladdin's throne, surrounded by illusions, treasures that meant nothing, and in his heart, still, he was empty. Back in the desert, night had fallen. Aladdin built a small fire beside the buried palace steps. He and Layla sat close, wrapped in a single cloak, listening to the wind whistle across the sand. "I don't have the lamp," he said. "Not anymore." Layla leaned her head on his shoulder. "You never needed it," she said. "You were kind before magic. You were brave before wishes." Aladdin looked at the ring. Faintly, it shimmered, and with quiet hope, he closed his eyes and whispered, "Genie, if you can hear me, we don't need power, just a path, a way home, together. No flash, no thunder, just wind, soft and steady, curling like a ribbon through the night air." And then the genie appeared, not tall and glowing, not bound or bent, but small, tired and smiling. "Your wish was not for yourself. That is why I came." He touched the sand gently, and from it rose the fig tree, its leaves green and trembling, even here. The palace followed, stone by stone, returning to its old warmth, its old light. Aladdin and Layla watched, hand in hand, as home unfolded around them. Azar felt the spell break. He stood from the throne, furious, calling for storms, for fire, for silence. But nothing answered. The genie returned to him, one final time. "Your last wish, Azar," he said, "can be one of freedom or fear, but not both." Azar looked into the mirror beside him and saw not a villain, just a boy, once lost, never found. And in that moment, he said nothing, but quietly, he let go. The lamp fell from his hand, its glow faded, and so did he. Not in fire, not in ruin, just gone, like mist in the morning. The desert was still, silent in that strange, endless way where sand becomes sky and time folds into itself. Aladdin stood beside Layla, both of them wrapped in the quiet ruins of their palace, now half buried in dunes. The wind carried no answers, only the soft rasp of sand against stone and the steady rhythm of breath beside him. He had lost a lamp, but not everything. Layla was with him, alive, steady, and the ring on his finger, the one gifted by the genie long ago, still shimmered faintly, warm to the touch. He looked out over the horizon. "Do you think he'll come back?" Layla asked. Her voice didn't tremble. She wasn't afraid, only tired. Aladdin nodded, slowly. Left double moon sky, Aladdin sat alone beside a candle. The flame danced in the wind, refusing to go out. He turned the rings slowly, remembering the genie, not as a tool, but as a friend. Someone who had watched him grow, someone who had never once made him feel small. And so, quietly, with no grand words or demands, he whispered, left double quotation mark. For a long moment, there was only the hush of the desert. And then, a shift, a breeze that came not from the wind, but from somewhere deeper, and in its center, the genie appeared. He was older now, somehow. Not in years, but in presence. His form softer, his glow dimmer, but his eyes still kind. "You called with grace," he said, "and so I answer as a friend, not a servant." Aladdin bowed his head in quiet respect. "He has the lamp," Aladdin said, "but we still have our hearts. Is that enough?" The genie smiled. "It always was." The genie raised his hand, and from it spilled visions, not spells, not storms, but options. Paths. "You may take the lamp back," the genie said. "Wrest it from Azar's hands, trap him, undo him. Or," he added gently, "you may make your final wish now and let the lamp go forever." Aladdin looked at Layla, standing beside him now, silent and steady. She didn't try to persuade him, because love, when it's true, does not control. But the genie set the stage, and the dark flew from the gate, but without magic, without the thing that twisted him. The world would be his to shape or waste. The candle beside them flickered. Rain began to fall, soft, warm rain from clouds that had arrived unnoticed. And in that quiet, Aladdin made his decision. "Then let this be my wish," he said softly. "No more masters, no more servants. Let the lamp be returned to the earth. Let the cycle end." The genie nodded, and for the first time, he breathed. A long, deep breath that seemed to stretch across centuries. Then, with hands as delicate as wind over water, he lifted the image of the lamp from the air, and it dissolved. Not in light, but in silence. The palace did not return in a blaze of magic. Instead, it rebuilt itself over days, brick by brick, step by step, with hands, with effort, with care. Aladdin and Layla planted new trees in the garden. The fig tree grew again, slowly, patiently, its roots deeper than before, and the genie, now free, wandered not as a spirit, but as a traveler, a storyteller. He would sometimes visit, bringing small gifts, a folded star map, a pressed flower from a forest no one knew. and always a smile. One evening, long after the last spell had faded, Layla asked Alahi was actually a secret. When Layla took photos, listened, there was no shame of the people of the world past. He thought for a while, watching the rain trace rivers down the glass. No, he said, magic gave me a beginning, but love gave me the rest. And they sat together by the window, the world soft around them, the candlelight steady. Not as rulers, not as legends, just two souls who chose peace when they could have chosen power. The palace never quite returned to what it once was. It wasn't as tall. The gold domes were simpler now, brushed by time instead of polished daily. The gardens were wild in places, and vines crept across the old stones, as if nature wanted to join in the rebuilding. But to Aladdin and Layla, it was perfect. Not because of magic, but because everything here, every path, every blossom, every rebuilt wall, was real, made with their hands, grown with their patience, carried forward with love. Their mornings were unhurried. They woke to soft light and the gentle hush of rain tapping the windows. Sometimes they'd brew cardamom tea. Sometimes they'd sit without speaking, watching the fig tree sway, remembering how it once grew in the desert sand. The people of Zaran came to know them not as rulers behind walls, but as a pair who walked the markets hand in hand, who sat beneath awnings when it rained, who remembered names and stories and little kindnesses. Aladdin often gave away more than he kept. Coins to beggars, shoes to children, time to anyone who needed to be heard. And Layla, she painted again. Not for galleries, just for joy. Little watercolors of the sky when it stormed, of their garden after rain, of Aladdin asleep beside a book he never finished. In the west wing of the palace, they built a small room, round, quiet, filled with cushions and lanterns of every shape. Here, Aladdin kept his stories, old scrolls, loose pages, and memories passed down by word and candlelit. Each night, as the rain fell softly outside, he would light one lantern and tell Layla a tale. Sometimes it was a real one, sometimes one he'd woven himself. But always, she listened, as if hearing the stars sing. And when he finished, she would rest her head on his chest and say, "Tell me again how we began." And he always would. You pass softly the wood. One night, just as the moon settled behind the clouds, the genie returned. Not in a flash, not in wind. He simply appeared at the garden gate, wearing a dusty traveler's cloak. His eyes wise and tired in the kindest way. Aladdin welcomed him without surprise. Layla embraced him like an old friend. They sat by the fig tree, sipping warm tea. "I've seen 1,000 kingdoms," the genie said, "but none like this." "What's different?" Layla asked gently. He smiled. "Here, the magic stayed in the people, not in the power." Aladdin looked down at his hands, weathered now, steady. "What will you do?" he asked. "Rest," the genie said, "and listen to rain. I've spent so long granting wishes, I forgot how beautiful it is when people stop needing them." And when he left, he didn't vanish. He just walked, into the mist. A free soul. In time, the story of Aladdin changed. It was no longer about a genie or a lamp. It became a quieter tale of a boy who grew into a man, not through treasure, but through kindness, of a girl who chose her path, not through duty, but through love, of a palace not built in a day, but grown like a tree, season by season. They never ruled a kingdom of armies, but they guided a city through gentleness and left behind peace where others might have chased glory. Years later, in that same lantern room, a candle flickered by the window. Rain tapped lightly outside, and somewhere, a fig tree swayed in the dark. An old scroll lay open. Its ink faded, its words simple, and as sleep came softly to Aladdin's eyes, he smiled, because stories, like lives, don't need to be loud to be legendary. Some simply drift into the night, with rain on the roof, and love in the quiet. Time, like rain, never asks permission to pass. Years had folded into one another, soft and slow. The city of Zaran had changed. New towers had risen. Children now played where fig trees once first took root. But in one quiet corner of the city, the garden still stood. It was older now, wilder. The stone paths cracked gently under moss, and lanterns swayed on crooked hooks, glowing like sleepy fireflies. No one lived in the palace anymore, but it breathed, as though it remembered everything. Every so often, travelers would stumble upon the garden, some seeking shelter from the rain, others simply following a feeling. An old merchant once claimed he had laughter near the fountain. A young poet said the trees whispered stories when the moon was high. Children often left small pebbles or notes beneath the fig tree, without quite knowing why. And late one autumn night, a musician played a soft tune on a cracked oud beneath its branches, and wept, without knowing whose memory he was borrowing. In a small library near the edge of the city, an aging librarian kept a story tucked away on the highest shelf. A simple scroll, worn by hands and years. It told the tale of a boy with no name who found a lamp, but stayed a legend because he gave it back. Of a woman who chose love over luxury. Of a genie who was freed. Of a palace that once vanished and reappeared, not through magic, but through hope. Children would ask for the story often, and the librarian, eventually we see the power of courage with the suffering of the castle, the best place that courage has been made on the castle. This one's best read slowly. It's not a tale you race through. It's one you dream into. One night, as rain whispered across the rooftops, a small boy stood beside his grandmother under the garden archway. He looked up at the fig tree, taller now than any tower in the city. Did they really live here? He asked. The woman smiled. They loved here, she whispered. And when people love well, the place remembers. The boy looked around. To him, the stone path shimmered. The wind hummed a lullaby he couldn't quite place. Far away from Zahran, beyond sand and river, the genie had become something new, no longer bound to a lamp, no longer summoned. He wandered from village to village, never in a rush. People said he helped, not with wishes, but with words. He told stories beneath lanterns in marketplaces. He listened more than he spoke. And sometimes, when someone was truly in pain, he'd simply sit beside them and stay. No glow, no spell, just presence. He had learned, over all his lifetimes, that sometimes the greatest magic is being there when someone thinks no one will be. Aladdin and Layla had no statues built in their name, no holidays, no gold coins printed with their faces. But their story, it lasted longer than marble. It lived in the values the city kept, in how people treated strangers kindly, in how marketplaces stayed open late so no one went to bed hungry. And most of all, it lived in how people told stories, not just for entertainment, but to remember who they were and who they could still become. Each generation added their thread, some true, some imagined, but always rooted in the memory of two people who chose love over legend. Then one night, many seasons later, the rain came in a way no one expected. It wasn't loud or violent, just constant. It fell across rooftops and windows, over towers and temples, down the garden stones of the old palace, now blanketed in moss and memory. And when the rain reached the fig tree, it lingered, like an old friend returning after a long journey. No one could explain it, but that night, people across Zaran slept more deeply, dreamt more sweetly, and woke with the feeling that something precious had returned. Not gold, not power, but peace. Thank you for being part of this quiet journey. If the story brought you calm, a sense of wonder, or simply helped you rest in a storm of your own, we'd love to have you stay with us. Subscribe to Legend Before Sleep for more bedtime stories written for grown-up dreamers. Stories told slowly, softly, and always under the sound of gentle rain. I'm Sean, and it's been an honor to share these nights with you. Sleep deeply, wake gently, and until next time, good night.